Well, hello. Well, hello. Well, hello, Mike Manley. You're jamming out to that intro music.
The intro, me and Cornwell.
Cornwell's turned into a really important fourth host on this show.
He's the one who controls all.
all seeing, all knowing, third eye. But your other cat, Fetchin, doesn't kind of come hang out for these as much, does he?
No, he doesn't like to. He doesn't get in my lap as much. Cornwell is, smaller and lighter. So, and I had some hummus, and he loves hummus. So,
who doesn't love hummus?
Well, he's the only cat I've ever had who liked hummus. So I was having a little hummus as a snack right before, and he's like, "Give me some of that hummus."
Yeah, you know what this is about. Get that hummus over here. Give me some more of that joint.
Yeah.
Well,
the garlic hummus. The garlic hummus.
Oh yeah, that's an issue. Cat breath on top of cat breath. Hummus cat breath. Welcome everybody back to Pencil to Pencil, your favorite pandemic podcast, brought to you every Tuesday
by COVID. By COVID.
Like by Menon. By right.
COVID.
I was saying hello to all our regulars, our penciliers who are checking in for the evening. Well, hello. Well, hello. Hey, what's going on? And if you know anything about what we do here, Pencil to Pencil, a lot of our regulars who check in and interact with us live are extremely important people in their own right. A lot of cartoonists, a lot of creatives and other types hang out in the chat.
The other types, those are the ones you got to watch.
Those ne'er-do-wells, yeah.
Those ne'er-do-wells. Very important ne'er-do-wells.
And what I also enjoy is once in a while some of the diamond people show up. Like Walt pops up once in a while, and everybody's like, "Oh my God, is that Walt Simonson?" Like, yeah, Walt's always hanging around in the chat room, so that's cool. It's always exciting to see everybody. Happy pre-Thanksgiving. If you
pre-itis.
Happy pre-eating sweats to everybody. My name is Jamar Nicholas, Philadelphia's favorite son, and the Black Dick Cavett. And hold on, Mike, I got a new one. I got a new nickname. You ready? Johnny Carson.
Good night, folks. Johnny Carson.
Yeah, one of the regulars gave me that one. I love it. That's exciting stuff. That's wild stuff.
You probably never watched. You're too young to have watched Johnny Carson.
What are you talking about? I grew up on Carson. I was a Carson, Letterman, SNL person.
Really?
Yeah, and a little Tom Snyder, a little Dick Cavett.
Oh, Dad's here.
Hey, Pops, how are you? Good to see you.
Hey, Mom, too.
Oh, Mom's in the background. Hello. As you all know, I am always joined at the proverbial hip by my best bud and modern master of comic books, Mike Manley. Say hi, Mike.
Hi, John Mar. There you go, John Mar.
Some of you may think I'm goofy, but no, I'm just bringing entertainment to your podcast. Welcome. I believe that our best bud Brett Blevins might be hanging out with us a little later, right?
I sent him the link. I know he was planning on being here, so
okay, all right. Well, I don't want to keep Bob waiting because we have so much stuff to cover. But I just want to give a shout out to our sponsors. If you look up there at the John, you see the John right there. Our good buddies at Graphicsly are the people behind Clip Studio Paint. And also our publisher in good standing, John Morrow, who is the publisher of Draw Magazine.
Who?
Oh, well, no, Brett just came in and messed my flow up. Hey, Brett.
All right.
And a publisher of Draw Magazine is also our second sponsor. And welcome everybody to the chat. Our good buddy Brett Blevins. Hey, Brett. How are you? What's going on?
I just had a little technical problems. If anybody cares about this boring story, I've had mice getting into my car problems.
Huh, like in the engine type of thing?
Yeah, they crawl up and then if they get through, they eat the wires and everything. So my system that works is I have blinking Christmas lights arranged on this little platform, and I drive over and park over it every night under the engine. And hello. And So I have to turn it on at night when the sun goes down. And tonight my cat was waiting by the door and bolted out when I opened the garage door to turn the lights on. So I had to catch her and put her back in. Everything's cool.
Well, I'm glad everything worked out. It's also good to form our podcast Voltron once again. Brett Blevins, Mike Manley, Jamar Nicholas, the three-headed monster of Pencil to Pencil. So I just want to get back to it. Anybody who's joining us for the first time on YouTube, hello. Facebook, hello. This is a live show that you can interact with us. So if you have questions of good merit and standing, feel free to put them in the comments in the chat, and you may get on the screen. I want to bring in our guest for the evening. Bob Camp has done everything and almost anything in the comic book industry. And I just found out some really cool info about some early gigs that he did that I want to talk about. I think a lot of people may know Bob from his time at Sprumco and co-founding that and Ren and Stimpy and all of that good stuff. So I'm sure that's going to come up, but there's a lot of ground to cover underneath that before we get to all of that. So let's just bring Bob in and get the show started. Hey, Bob, how are you?
Hello. Hey, Brett.
Hi, Bob. How are you?
I'm okay, I think. Nice to see you.
You too. It's been such a long time.
I know, right? Last time I saw you, we weren't so old.
Yeah, I think my beard was nice and red the last time
Yeah, mine was too.
That's great.
I just realized too that we all four have glasses. This is the first time we've had all four people here with glasses.
Is that? I just assume everybody who's a cartoonist has glasses or wears them at some point.
And a hunched back.
Oh yeah, the hunch is a real thing.
Did you always wear glasses, Bob?
Like almost to the day when I turned 40, suddenly I couldn't see.
Like
like somebody flipped a switch. Suddenly, like, wow, I can't focus on my drawing anymore, so I had to go get glasses.
Yeah, I heard that there was a lot of people who didn't wear glasses by the time they were in their mid-40s had to wear glasses.
Oh, I used to have great vision. I could see it, miles in every direction. I could, look at really tiny, close stuff, and it wasn't a problem. But age is a funny thing, right? I was talking to a kid one time about it. He said, "What's it like when you like get older and stuff?" I said, "Well, like what I look at when I see stuff, it's like imagine that your head is inside a broken television, and you got really bad reception, and the vertical hold is off, and there's a lot of pieces are broken out of the image, and you're looking through dirty glass. Yeah, it's like that."
And then he goes, "What's vertical hold?"
What's vertical hold?
Right. So we're going back to when your television remote was a pair of pliers.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Our TV was a piece of furniture. It was a Magnavox, a 1964 Magnavox Color, and it was 6 feet long. It had a full stereo system built into it.
Oh yeah.
It had a bar built into it. It was like the most important piece of furniture in our house. Yeah. And it came with stereo records by Herb Alpert and Tijuana Brass and Esquivel.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you had the record player on one side, the bar on the other side, and the TV in the middle.
Yeah. And it was beautiful wood. It weighed, thousands of pounds. It was a huge, big piece of furniture.
Bob, did you put the new TV on top of the old TV?
Or
did you get rid of the whole thing?
No, we got a new one.
Now you could probably sell that thing for like $1 zillion.
Yeah, I don't even know what happened to it. Who knows? It's gone.
Yeah, that was like when that stuff was a major appliance, a big piece of your living room. Those big TVs, yeah.
Oh, sure. And it was, everybody sat real close to it. I used to build tents. I'd get all the sheets and blankets and chairs and stuff, and the TV was always a part of the tent. And I eat a lot of cereal down there and watch Slam Bang Theater with the Three Stooges.
But that was also back when they said if you sat too close, you would get radiation from your TV screen. You remember that?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Oh, hey, I lived in Houston for a while when I was a kid, and it was really hot in the summer. So we would ride our bicycles behind the DDT trucks because it was cool and it smelled nice. So, kids are tougher than you think.
That's awesome.
That's very true. That's very true. So why don't you give us a little bit of your origin, because one of the things I found interesting, especially guys in our generation who work in animation and comics, there was a lot of crossover of people who wanted to do comics and wanted to do animation, and there's a lot of people who kind of did a little bit of both, because you started in comics right before you went into animation, right?
Kind of, but it wasn't how I started out. I started out as a caricature and portrait artist at Six Flags. And a lot of guys started out. Tom Richmond, you know, the Mad Magazine guy, he was the same thing. He was a Six Flags caricature artist, I believe. A lot of guys started out like that. And it's how I learned how to draw funny, you know. And I did that for a while. Then I hit the road in the late 70s, and I traveled around with a couple of people, with a guy you know, Mike, you know Vincent Waller, don't you?
Mm-hmm. No, I've never met him, but I know of.
Yeah. And I think, Brad, you've met Vincent, haven't you?
I don't know. I don't know if I have.
He was like a long-haired guy when I had long hair, and we were inseparable. We were best friends, and we traveled around together a lot doing caricatures and portraits. We followed the rodeo circuit, and I had a VW bus that I made into a camper, and it was sort of how we got around. And I had a dog in there named Fleagle the Beagle, and you know, lived on the road doing caricatures, portraits.
So
things like that.
Would be could be an HBO. That could be a Netflix series. You know? Yeah,
sure. It could be. Except I don't know, the trauma of reliving it might kill me. I don't know. But it was crazy fun times. You know, we traveled around with another guy named Benjamin Vincent, who's a well-known caricature artist now. But the way I got into like print, things like that, is I was doing caricatures in actually portraits in Provincetown, Massachusetts, on Cape Cod, P-Town. And I met a cartoonist that you might know, Mike. Maybe you know him, Brett. Gary Hallgren, one of the Air Pirate funnies.
I know the name. I've never met him, but yeah.
No.
Yeah. He did a lot of like illustration for National Lampoon, things like that. Really good cartoonist. And he was doing caricatures at Cape Cod, and I was doing portraits in the same area. And we got to be friends. And he said, you know, he says, if you want to come to New York, you can crash in my studio, and I'll introduce you to Larry Hama, and you can work at Marvel Comics. I'm like, yeah, you know. So I did that. I slept in a chair in Gary's studio, and I was his assistant. And I did, you know, painted his comics and did the color sets and all that kind of stuff, and inked and did all that. And then I worked for Larry on Crazy Magazine doing movie parodies.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And it was, you know, I don't know if you're familiar with the Larry Hama Years of Crazy Magazine, but it was great.
Yeah.
It was really a lot of great stuff, and really funny stories. So I was working with Paul Kupperberg.
Okay. Yeah.
He was writing the stories, and I was drawing them. And then the magazine went under. They killed it for some reason. Larry called me and said, "Hey, Bob, I hope you haven't grown too enamored of your $700 a month doing those crazy movie parodies." And because that's how much I was making. And I said, well, yeah. He says, well, that's okay. Now you can ink John Buscema. So I threw up. Threw up everywhere. But no, and he got me a job in the bullpen doing not color corrections, but art corrections. So I was kind of like the Romita's Raiders before there were Romita's Raiders, and it was just me. And I did all of the art corrections on the entire Marvel line.
Wow.
By myself. And no one bothered to tell me that it was unreasonable to ask a punk kid like me to do a job like that. When I started inking, I didn't even know what to ink with. What do I use? Markers? I don't know.
Wow.
So they set me next to Vinnie Coletta and Frank Giacoia in the bullpen, and they were like my buddies. And Frank taught me how to ink.
Wow.
And
he was one of the best guys ever. I mean, that guy was fantastic.
He was terrific just to be next to. It was great times. It was like who was there? Jack Abel was there. Mori Kuramoto was there. George Roussos was there. A lot of the old time guys were still in the bullpen. You know.
Wow.
It was fun.
Bob, did you have a period of, I don't know, like a rough transition from coming off the road, so to speak, into coming into Marvel and just kind of like learning trial by fire? You just got your hands dirty. Right?
No, I it's real funny. Like, I think at the beginning of this, you mentioned like somebody wanting to do comics or somebody wanting to do animation. I never had a dream. I never had like, oh, someday I hope to be like Chuck Jones. I like Chuck Jones, and I liked his cartoons, and I like Wally Wood, and I like Mort Drucker, and I like the Three Stooges. I like all that stuff. But I never thought I want to be like him. I just figured I'll just be an artist, and I'll do whatever comes along. So I would get jobs, and I'd usually lie my way into the job, and then I just wing it, see what I could do. And that's how I kind of bounced around from job to job. I was working for Larry at Marvel, and one of my roommates was a fellow named Jim Meskimen. He's an actor and a comedian and does really good impressions and stuff. But he was one of our roommates in New York at our artist loft, and he was doing character designs on Thundercats for Rankin Bass. And he decided, I don't want to be a cartoonist anymore. I want to be a comedian and be in movies. So he kind of quit doing that. He got me the job on Thundercats. So I really liked working there. It was a great studio. And I was making better money than I'd ever made. And I felt like this is kind of what I want to do. So I just Vincent Waller hopped in my 66 T-Bird with the dog, and we drove to LA and got jobs in LA in animation.
Wow.
Where'd you start working?
Deke.
Okay.
Deke. I started working on Alf Tales for Kevin Altieri, may have been. And we all know Kevin. And I didn't like the show at all, and I didn't really enjoy working on it. And I realized, they're making Ghostbusters like right down the hall. So I just quit. And before anybody realized I quit, I walked across the hall and got a job on Ghostbusters. So I'm sitting next to Bruce Timm all day, watching him draw. And I mentioned before we came on that I called him the human sewing machine. Just watching his hand draw was like, and just perfect lines and perfect design and all that. And he's like a sponge. Like, how people never wanted to go on stage before Robin Williams because he'd steal all your jokes. Right. It's like Bruce Timm walks in the room and sucks all the talent out of everybody else, and then he owns it. Yeah. He's like that.
So were you into like collecting comics and stuff as a kid? Were you?
No, I never read comics. The only they were there. I mean, every now I kind of look at them, but every now and then one of them would blow my mind. Like I'd see it and it would just change my life. Like the first time I saw Denny O'Neil and the Green Lantern, Green Arrow stuff that Neil Adams and him did. When I saw that, I was like, holy crap, this isn't comics, this is real. And it really blew my mind. Mobius blew my mind.
Mobius kind of blew everybody's mind.
Yeah.
And it's funny because that stuff was actually several years old by the time it got here.
Sure. But I remember you remember the first time you picked up Metal Halal, heavy metal? I was in a 7-Eleven and I picked it up and I sat on the floor, and Bill Ray has the same story, the same exact story. He sat on the floor till they came and pried it out of his hands and made him pay for it. Like, are you going to buy that?
Yeah. But
if every now and then, I see somebody's stuff who just like, oh my God, like Richard Corbin. I really, so here's what kind of got me into the idea of doing comics. When I was 12, my brother ran a business out of the back of a head shop in Fort Worth, Texas, selling carnations. And he hired hippies. This is 1968, okay? And so I was a 12-year-old hippie, and I was selling carnations on street corners, and I was hanging out in a head shop, sitting on a waterbed, reading Abby Hoffman's Steal This Book and Zap Comics and Captain Pissgums and the Fabulous Furry Freak Brothers and Richard Corbin, Death Comics. It just they were doing stuff that I thought, this is what I want to do. This is crazy, weird stuff. So I liked the idea of doing stuff that was different, and trying something out new. And
it's also because I remember I grew up in Detroit, but before we moved to Detroit, we would go to Ann Arbor, and a couple times on our visits, you would go into a store that would have the underground stuff, and you're just a kid, so you just like, oh, a comic, and then I think I saw some Fabulous Furry Freak Brothers, and probably some Robert Crumb stuff, and I tried to get my parents to buy it, and they're like, no, you can't. But it's funny when you see that stuff as a kid, you just accept it,
Yeah.
It's all comics.
Yeah. Even Crumb.
Yeah. It's kind of like weird, and it kind of, some of it really goes over your head, but
it didn't go over my head.
Oh, okay.
No, I got it. The butt snoids. I thought, wow, this is the shit. I loved it. But I was in those days, like all my relatives were like selling pot, smoking pot. They were like it was the 70s, and so I was around it a lot. I didn't do it back then, but I was around it a lot. So the counterculture was already, had me. And I collected Mads. I did collect Mad magazines.
Okay.
You want to hear a great story about my Mad collection?
Yeah.
So I was collecting Mads, and for a while, my older brother was living with us, and so I was up late looking at my comics, and I had them in a pile next to the bed, and they were all stacked nice and neat in order and everything. And I went to sleep. In the middle of the night, I wake up and it's pitch dark in my room, and there's this sound next to my head. It's like this really kind of loud noise right next to my head. And I'm like, what the hell is that? So I kind of get up against the wall, and I inch around the room, and I get over to the light, and I flick it on, and I look, and there's my brother, drunk and naked, standing there pissing on my stack of Mad magazines. And it did, and of course they were ruined. And he felt terrible about it, but he didn't replace my Mad, so I had to throw them all out. But I did like Mad. I think if I had to point to like a comic that I was most influenced by is Mad, and Wally Wood and all the guys there, on that comic. I'm sure we're all like heavily influenced by Mad.
Oh yeah, I think for our generation, that's sort of like, because there's guys that didn't read superheroes, but still like cartooning, and even people that were casual readers read Mad magazine.
Yeah. I think everybody read Mad magazine.
And so it's sort of interesting that you just did that. Your path into working in animation wasn't like a lot of people growing up going, oh, I want to work for Disney, or I want to do my version of the Roadrunner or whatever.
Yeah.
It's sort of like you came in and you did it, and you were interested, but it wasn't like a goal. It seemed like a driving.
No. And I'm not really like a fan. Mm-hmm. I hate to say, like, I don't watch animation much. I've seen The Simpsons just a few times. I know. Really? It's weird. It's weird. Yeah. It's like, if it's something that just really catches my attention and it's on, I'll watch it. Yeah. But I don't, think, oh, gotta watch The Simpsons. Get out of the way. Turn on the TV. I never did that. I'm not, and it's nothing bad about The Simpsons. I have attention problems. I'm like, my brain is like a ping pong ball in a windstorm. It bounces around a lot. I'm sure you're seeing that now, but I don't sit and obsess about anything and collect it, or I went through periods of collecting a few things, but
Did you collect all your old Mads again?
No. I never did. Once I've had a few occurrences in my life where everything I owned either burned up or was destroyed or I lost it in a relationship, and I never looked back, and it kind of cured me of collecting stuff. Like,
wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, like when I was living in New York in the 80s, I lived in a loft, and I had like a working 1940s phone booth. I had two pinball machines. I had a jukebox. I had a collection of neon signs and soda pop collectibles, and I had tons of shit like that. I had tons of comics. But I kind of just got in my T-Bird and went to LA, and I just walked away from all that stuff. I never even looked back. So,
wow. Because I know a lot of people, when eBay happened, people started trying to recapture their childhood. One auction at a time.
Yeah, but that stuff got expensive.
Yeah, all the stuff that moms threw away. See, if moms didn't throw away stuff, everything would be cheap. Moms made eBay possible because moms would throw your shit away.
Thanks,
Mom.
Mom.
Like, oh, you don't want that anymore, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh, hey, I have a couple of questions.
Sure,
Bob. Before we get away from the Marvel, part of your origin, our good buddy J. Robert Deans asked a question about doing corrections. He asked, Mr. Camp, did you do corrections right on a page or on bits of correction paper pasted over the mistakes?
That's a really good question. It depended on the correction. Sometimes I would have to move panels around or take out a panel and redraw a panel, and I would really focus on trying to draw like the artists in their style. Like, okay, I'm doing Herb Trimpe today, you know. But a lot of times what I would do is I would take a new sheet of paper, tape it over the original art, lay it on a light table, and I would get an X-Acto, and I would cut out the offending part of the art, and then the piece of paper, actually the new piece of paper is under it, and it makes a puzzle piece. If you bear down hard enough with the X-Acto, you know, a cutout of a character could lift out, and you have another piece that fits in, and you just tape it on the back, and you know, once you ink it, it's fine.
Yeah, they would call that mortising in the. It's like that's the way the guy taught me was. We would call it like a mortise. You would just like cut it.
Mortise.
Yeah, it would like fit right in. Yeah.
Yeah. See, I didn't know there was a name for it, but yeah, I did that a lot. I just did whatever came up. I tried to avoid using whiteout because it's just something that whiteout, just the use of it, just, you know, kind of disgusts me.
So there's a follow-up question to that. JRD then asks, which artists were the most difficult to mimic when making corrections in the bullpen?
Oh, God, I don't know. I don't know. Like, I can't say. I really can't say. I think the hardest thing was to not screw up inking John Buscema. So I got a great John Buscema story. So I'm hanging out in the bullpen, and Larry says, "Okay, now you're John Buscema's inker." So after cleaning the shit out of my pants, I asked the guys in the bullpen. I asked like Frank and those guys, like, you know, who does John like inking him? Who are the inkers he likes? They said, well, that's easy. He likes his brother Sal inking him, you know. Yeah. So I looked at some of Sal's inks, and I would look at that when I was inking John. That was like my kind of reference point. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know John because he never really came into Marvel. He, you know, they delivered stuff to and from his house, and I never met him. But I was at a Comic Con, and there was John Buscema. And when I was working at Marvel, I was in my early 20s, but I looked 12. You know, I didn't look like a fully formed human being yet. I couldn't grow a beard. You know? Yeah. But so I went up and I said, "Hey, Mr. Buscema, I'm Bob Camp. I'm your inker." And he just laughed. Oh, you're that kid that tries to ink like Sal. And I went, yes, fucking yes, that's me. And I felt like it was this huge thing. Like he picked it up, you know, that or maybe somebody told him, I don't know, but you know, it made me feel really good. I didn't feel bad at all about it. I was just like real happy that he didn't tell me I sucked, you know. So it was kind of cool.
Did
I'm-
you keep any? Did you keep any of the pages? Do you still have pages from that? Did you keep any?
I have one or two somewhere, but most of the stuff I have is gone. So when I left New York, I was broke and I wanted to go to LA. So I had like stacks of Buscema originals that I inked. And I sold a bunch of them to a guy. I can't remember his name. He ran an art gallery.
Al Zernicki?
No. The Psychedelic Solution. You remember that gallery in New York?
Oh no.
There was like a hippie dude that ran it, and he had a lot of Fillmore posters, stuff like that.
Okay.
A lot of psychedelic stuff. He bought a lot of my pages for like $10 a page. But
Wow.
yeah, and Albert Moy bought the rest. He
Okay.
bought them for pennies. I don't know. Albert still laughs about that. But yeah, I don't have much to show for it. It's funny. I'm kind of used to that, like working in animation. You don't ever get to keep the art. It goes into the machine and you never see it again. You know, Mike, when you do storyboards, you send them in and that's it. They just vanish. You know.
I have some, and some I
Yeah.
don't. Some it would depend. I would always try to keep them if I could.
Yeah.
Sometimes they would want them. Sometimes they would forget to ask for them, so you wouldn't send them.
Yeah. Well,
You
now
know?
now it's easier because everybody
digital,
accepts digital, you
Yeah.
know, and everybody
Yeah.
works digital. Hey,
Yeah.
Brett, are you still working old school, like pen and ink and all that? Are you doing digital?
I do that, but I work digital. I've done a lot of digital work. I switched to digital boarding in 2009, I think.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was working on Batman Brave and Bold, and things were switching over. And then I was also working on Ben 10.
Ben
And so
10. It was a good show.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I did a lot of Ben 10, and it was, as you know, it's in a lot of ways it's a lot easier, especially like duplicating backgrounds and all that kind of stuff.
It is, but it's kind of a trap too, because it's like when I first discovered Photoshop, I would get so involved with the process and this deep tool that has all of these amazing things you can do.
Yeah.
So you get wrapped up in doing that, you know, and you get like kind of lost. I do, because I get over focused because I have ADHD squared.
Well, I have to say, I don't want to overstate this, but there's a part of me that kind of resents it. So I wasn't too seduced by it. I was just using it to get the results quicker.
Sure. But do you use Storyboard Pro?
Yeah, that's what we used.
It's the standard in the business. But I find that it obliges you to do more production work than you would have done if you had just penciled it on paper.
Yeah, well, it certainly became that requirement. I kind of left before that really took hold. So I never made an animatic or laid the sound in or anything like that.
Yeah, because now I don't think anybody's asking anybody to put the sound in, but you are responsible for putting the dialogue in the right place and also building the camera moves, because you can do that. So I guess you just better do it. So and me, I don't really care. You know, I just draw a square around it, put in some arrows, and there you go. There's your camera move. Next scene. You know.
Well, fortunately, in Storyboard Pro, it's pretty easy to get the camera to move, and then you can watch it go by and make sure it's panning correctly and all that.
Yeah.
That was actually kind of fun to see it moving when you're working on it. I like that.
Yeah, it is kind of fun. It is, but I don't know. Are you still doing storyboards? Anybody?
No, the thing I worked on was one of those direct-to-video movies where William Shatner was Two-Face. It was the Adam West version of Batman.
Oh, he's not two-faced. He's just schizophrenic.
But that's
his real hair. That's his real hair.
Well, fortunately, when you're recording just a voice, it doesn't matter what you look like, I guess.
Yeah.
If he wants to.
Well, I don't know, but I kind of quit doing storyboards because they suck to do, and they kill you, and the deadlines are unreasonable. You know, you got to do an 11-minute cartoon in 4 weeks, and what I really hate is that now they check up on you constantly. Like, show me where you are today. Well, I showed you a couple of days ago. Well, show me where you are today. So you're like, you know, they're constantly checking in on you and seeing where you are. But that's not how I work. I like to sit and stare at the paper for days wishing I was dead. And then out of fear alone, I actually get the job done, you know.
Yeah.
But that doesn't fit in with their nitpicky schedule. Screw them.
It was hard to do back in the old days because the most advanced thing we had was faxes. So now
Yeah.
you can always just click it up. I really didn't have that. That really hadn't taken hold when I was really doing it all the time, because I stopped doing it full time probably maybe 2015 or something, somewhere in there. And it hadn't gotten that oppressive at that point. But I'm the same way. It's, you know, most of my stuff is thinking. You know, it's like most of the time. Well, not most. Once you start drawing, it's 24 hours a day. But to get the thing all together, most of the time, this is what you're doing.
Yeah.
Just sitting there thinking, running it through your head, listening to the track, running it over.
Yeah. Taking notes.
Anything.
Yeah. I teach storyboarding at School of Visual Arts, and I tell my students right away. I go, look, and I know, Mike, you sent me your speech you send to your students the first day, and it's like baptism by fire. It's like, all right, you little assholes, and you read them the riot act day one, you know. But I tell them, I'm a big softy compared to you, but I tell them, look, you know, this is a real hard job, storyboarding. It's never gets easy.
It's the hardest. It's the hardest job.
It's the hardest because you're doing all the heavy lifting for the entire production, and the director is sitting back, you know, drinking lime rickies and watching old movies, and you're doing all the friggin' work. So it's a tough business. So I tell them, look, if you're not like really talented and you're driven to do this and it's all you're good for, you might have a hard time of it, because there's people out there that have this drive and this dedication and this ambition, and they're gonna beat your ass every day, you know, and you got to compete against those guys. So you got to really, you know, work hard and try to improve every day. Try to do better work today than you did yesterday, you know.
And you know, the thing about it too is that there are people that draw beautiful and their boards are okay, and there's people who don't draw as good, but their boards are great because they understand film. It's a whole different language, and a lot of people, they love drawing so much, but they can't do the film.
It's different. Like, yeah, because drawing well and telling a story are two completely different skill sets, and in fact, they're conflicting because you know, you're trying to work out your story, and you get hung up on a drawing, and suddenly you're Michelangelo, you know, and you've wasted a whole day farting around with one drawing when you should have had, you know, 10 pages of script worked out in rough. So I tell my students, look, I don't want to see any pretty drawings. I don't want to see any inked drawings. I don't want to see any color drawings. I want to see your thoughts. I want to see your thought processes. So I want to see the first drawing, and I want to be able to tell, okay, this is about your fifth drawing, right? I can tell where you're starting to get a hold of it, and you're starting to figure out this character's construction, you know, and I can see their process. I don't want to see one drawing you spend all day on. It's like, why are you wasting my time with this? Because you're not learning anything by doing one drawing. You learn by doing hundreds of drawings and you know, solving the problems and sort of getting your head around it.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny when I think back to how I learned, because Brett and I started actually on the same time on the same show. And I think in our case, our brain just kind of naturally worked that way. Like I always sort of felt like, even when I drew a comic, I could almost see it as a movie, and you're grabbing things to put it down on the page in a way.
Visualization.
Yeah. And what I found is that there was a lot of people who could do storyboards for like a commercial, because it's not hooking up.
It's just camera work.
Right. And even storyboards in live action film, it's not hooking up necessarily the same way if you're doing it, especially in TV animation, where you're doing all the key poses, you're doing everything.
Yeah.
You know, you're doing the layout, you're doing the key poses, you know, you're
doing the comedy, you're doing
Yeah. You're plussing the script. That was the other thing is you realize, you read a script and it's not funny. It's not It's not funny at
No,
all. And then you have to
not funny.
find some way to make it funny. And some
Yeah.
people can do it, and some people are like, they're good at drawing action, but they're not good at finding the humor or injecting something extra into the scene.
Sure. And I totally get that. I've had to kind of do it all because it was just a matter of self-preservation, you know. But I learned a lot, like I said, from Gary Hallgren. He was doing, I don't know if you've ever seen it, but he did a comic strip, which was sort of like Little Annie Fanny, different style, but it was for Swank magazine, which was a pretty rough around the edges porn magazine back in the day. And it was called Mustang Sally. And it was about Mustang Ranch, and he had this little blonde character, Mustang Sally, and he was drawing them, and I was coloring them. I was doing the color sets and all that, and I learned a whole lot about comics and from him. And he was real passionate about newspaper strips, like, you know, George Harriman, like old great strips, and that inspired me a lot. You know, I learned a lot from that. And then, of course, the Larry Hama throw you in the lake teaching method. You better swim. I learned a lot there. But yeah, like I said, I learned a lot doing caricatures at Six Flags. And a lot of people were just drawing like crappy little side views of somebody running, holding a bag of money, running to Las Vegas. You know, it's the same, always the same little body, and they could draw it in a couple of minutes, and you know, they get a couple of bucks for that. But I wanted to do, they were doing side views. I was doing like 3/4 caricatures, and I would say, what do you like to do? Well, I'm a skydiver, and I live in North Dakota, and I collect guns, and I would come up with this whole huge scenario, like a completely original gag that was funny and had all that stuff going on. And that's kind of, you know, I like honed my cartoon chops doing that, you know.
Yeah. What could you think of one or two things you really think of that you learned from like Larry or for Frank Giacoya, some technical thing that you carry with you?
So I'm sitting next to Frank, right? And I'm inking, and I've got this like it's a can, and I had a couple of upright things on either side and kind of a spring thing in the middle, and you'd hang your brushes in it. You remember those?
Yeah.
Brett's still got one, I bet, right?
Yeah.
So you hang your brush. Yeah, you hang your brush on it and you clean it. And I had some special cleaning solution, and I'm cleaning my brushes, and Frank's just looking at me, and he's thinking. He puts his brush down. He just sets it down, and it's starting to dry. And I go, "Hey, Frank, you better wash that brush." And he looks at me like, "Who the hell are you to tell me what to do with my brush?" You know? And he goes, "Yeah. So you take real good care of your brush. Yeah, you wash it and all that kind of stuff. How long does that brush last?" I go, "I don't know, like maybe a few months or something like that." He goes, "Yeah." He says, "You see this brush?" And it was black and hard. You could like poke somebody's eye out with it, right? And he said, "I've had this brush for 30 years. And I said, "Well, and you don't wash it?" "I never wash it." "What do you do?" And he goes, "Flick, flick, flick." And he holds it up, and it's perfect and clean, and it's got a beautiful point. And he just flicked it, and the ink fell off of it. And I thought, oh my God, what a genius. And he figured out that by washing it, you're breaking up the glue that holds the sable hairs in the brush, so they start to fall out, and you get a Series 7 sable brush that starts to fall apart. So I learned that.
Wow.
I learned a lot about page design from Larry Hama, about page layout and storytelling and stuff like that. But it wasn't like anybody like sat me down and pointed, "Okay, do this, do this." I just had to. I didn't really understand that process. I just would look at it and figure it out.
Well, because I also, one of the things from going from comics into animation is you're still dealing with composition.
Sure.
Right. And so there's one thing to be able to draw something funny, but there's another thing to be able to stage it so that it plays.
Yeah. So you know what I did when I first started working in funny animation? I think I was on Tiny Toons. I got DVDs, not DVDs, but tapes. Right. I think they were beta tapes, right. Old ones, and I got recorded all the Tex Avery cartoons I could. and I watched them over and over and over and over, and I would take notes, and I had a stopwatch, and I timed out the setup of the cartoon, and I counted the gags, and I broke the gags down into major gags and subset gags and all that. And then I started doing that and comparing it to Chuck Jones and Clampett and all that kind of stuff. So I kind of taught myself how to do that just by taking notes. And I did kind of like, notebooks full of notes about it just to figure it out.
That's great. I did something like that I used to do the same thing. As a teenager, I got a job. I think I told this before, where I got a job at a hardware store because then I could get a discount on buying a VCR. And I actually burned my first VCR out by running the stuff back and forth and doing like click, 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 click to study.
Yeah.
To study the stuff. But when I started doing boards, I remember Dan Reba was the first director I worked with, and he said, "Oh,
I know Dan."
Yeah, so he said, "Get that book shot by shot." So I got that, and then I would watch a lot of movies on Turner Classics, or what was it, AMC, before they became what they are now. And I would do a reverse storyboard where I would watch something, and then I would rough board out what I saw to study how it was done.
Yeah. That's the way to do it. I tell my students to do that. To just like deconstruct whatever it is they're watching.
So when you were when did you start boarding in animation? Because you went in, you were doing character design and stuff.
I designed everything. Like if there was, whole planets full of people, like a race of people in all their houses and their cars and their cats and their dogs, whatever. I designed it for Rankin Bass. I worked on like 4 or 5 different shows for them. What was your question originally?
When did you start actually? When did you transition from that into doing boards?
The first board I did. Okay, so I was working with Bruce Timm on Real Ghostbusters, and you know Will Mineo, don't you?
Mm-hmm.
Will was my boss, and a sweeter guy you'd never meet, and a talented artist and fun guy to work for. I met Jim Gomez. You know Jim?
Yeah. I know of Jim. I've never met him, but yeah.
Jim's one of the unsung heroes of Ren and Stimpy. He was the guy who was coming up with all the good jokes, and had the funny ideas. But we became friends right away, and he invited me to go to lunch with John Kay and Len Naylor, who was his girlfriend at the time, and a way more talented artist. But so we hit it off right away, and they were making Bob Clampett's Beanie and Cecil, the remake of Beanie and Cecil. And we were working for a woman named Jenny Triaz at ABC TV, and Sodie Clampett, Bob's widow, was an executive producer on the show. And it was some of Billy West's first working on that. I think he was doing Dishonest John, I forget. But and it was a massive clusterfuck. It was like, I'm surprised the building didn't catch fire. John had Eddie Fitzgerald as a director. There were different crews. John had a crew. Eddie Fitzgerald had a crew. Bill Frake, Bill Frake? Bill Frake, guy who's been around forever, worked in animation forever. He's retired now, but he created Scrap, worked on all the Ice Age movies. He had a crew there. And so in the middle of production, just for no reason that I could see, he fired Eddie. So Eddie's crew were a bunch of guys that had worked for John and Bakshi on Mighty Mouse, which, if you really want to ask where Ren and Stimpy came from, it came from Mighty Mouse, and it came from Ralph Bakshi. Ralph Bakshi's influence is unmistakable to me. But so these guys were on their own, and so they were just doing whatever the hell they wanted. And they weren't even there was no approval process for what they were doing. So we were kind of hiding everything from the network. So I did a storyboard, and I actually have it. It's for Wild Man, Go Man Van Gogh. Remember that character? from the Beanie and Cecil cartoons, Wildsville. Remember that guy? One Man Van Gogh. I storyboarded a cartoon of him, and it never got made. It never happened. I still have the board. No one's seen it. It's like one of these days I'm going to make a book out of it or something, because I look at it still, and I think it really is good. I'm really happy with it. But so yeah, worked. That's where I cut my teeth doing storyboards. Then after that, it was Tiny Toons, and then on to Ren and Stimpy after that.
So when did because I remember seeing the Ren and Stimpy short, the one that the first cartoon you guys did.
Big House Blues.
Big House Blues was in the Spike and Mike.
Spike and Mike. That's
and I remember laughing so hard that my cheek muscles felt like they tore.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do
you know I painted all the backgrounds on that?
Was that Bill?
I did.
Oh, you did it.
Bill had nothing to do with the pilot. He didn't come in until after, like in season 1. He jumped in there. But yeah, I created the style of the backgrounds for the show.
Wow.
And just because no one else could paint. You know, John would come in and like make me change a painting 100 times, and he would come in and grab the brush and he'd fuck the painting up and then storm out and then come back and go back to the first one. And it was all I could do to keep from beating him to death. I'm serious. I'm serious.
Yeah.
So how did the pilot come together? That's the one. The
Okay. So what happened is we were pitching stuff around and not having much success. And you know Jerry Beck. Everybody knows Jerry Beck, right? Yep. Jerry Beck had an office with this guy named Carl Masek. Carl was
that was the Robotech.
Yeah, that guy, Carl Masek, and he was a friend, and he had some connections at Nickelodeon, so he set up the meeting with Vanessa Coffey, who was the person who came up with the idea of Nicktoons, who pitched the idea of letting creators make their own cartoons and giving them, you know, the ability to have a vision and, you know, like auteur cartoonists, directors, and sold them on that idea. And she had seen John's work and was really blown away by it. So John and Carl Masek went and pitched a show idea, but it was a completely different show idea. It was one called Your Gang, which was John's take on the Our Gang comedies, like The Little Rascals. Yeah. Only it was enormous and it was overblown and it had too many characters. And Ren and Stimpy were like the dog and the cat in the show. They were minor characters. And Vanessa's like, no, get rid of all that. Just do the dog and the cat. So we got the budget to do the pilot, and we did the pilot with almost no direction from anybody. We were just winging it. It was just, you know, a lot of people worked on it. Mark Kausler worked on it. Of course, Bob Jakes and Kelly worked on it. A lot of great animators worked on that.
So people were jumping in, filling in different spots as you needed, right? Like,
sure. And I can't really say much as to the production process, like how that worked, because I don't think it worked. I think it sort of magically, sort of accidentally happened that it came together and got made. Because John didn't really care about budgets or deadlines. He said as much, you know. So we would just sort of like make the cartoon and make it up as we were going along. But the good thing is that everybody on the show was dedicated to topping each other and topping themselves and making funnier, better cartoons and living the legendary sort of termite terrace lifestyle of, you know, doing storyboard driven cartoons and just making it up out of your head and letting the storyboard artist call the shots, you know. So that's why we made some great cartoons, is because you know, we were allowed to, and I think Nickelodeon was really naive to trust us. And
well, the business was also a little bit different than it is now, right? Because now you have these big giant places like it was like a mom and pop thing. It was like Geraldine Laybourne and her husband Kit. They sort of had a mom and pop sort of basement operation. Nickelodeon wasn't a big deal.
and it got bought out by Viacom. You know, now if when I work for Nickelodeon, it's just like as different as you can imagine from what we did. There was not a whole lot of like oversight. I mean, we got away with so much. I was just constantly shocked at what we were allowed to get away with. And I didn't really have any kind of tact back then, or any kind of filters or self-control. I don't have much now, but I'm just too tired to be as big an asshole as I used to be. But so, you know, I was the one who had to be on the phone with this poor guy named Will McRobb, who he was a very talented writer who did a lot of shows for Nickelodeon back then, like Pete and Pete was his show, and created a lot of shows. But he was the guy who had to be the go-between between us, meaning me, and Nickelodeon. So there was issues with content, you know, constantly. So what we had to do is we had to stay away from stuff that was overtly sexual or drug-like, about drugs. There was catchphrase stuff. But we figured out how to do it. It was we would put red herring jokes in. We put jokes in that they're supposed to cut out. Like there's no way they're going to let this go through. But sometimes they would still cut like major scenes that had something to do with the plot and leave the jokes that were meant to be shocking. That's, you know, some of them got through. The poor woman, I felt bad for her, who was the broadcast standards and practices person for the network. And for anybody out there who doesn't know what broadcast standards and practices is, it's an office that any network has, and some poor sap has to sit in there and look at all the content that network produces and decide whether or not it's going to piss off the FCC, and so they won't pull their license to broadcast, you know. So this woman, and I don't know if this is true, but the story was that before she got this job, she was a nun. And so I would negotiate for these jokes, you know, and so we made a cartoon called Prehistoric Stimpy, and there were so many really over the top jokes in that cartoon that got through, but it was just really weird. Like, okay, so there's scenes that take place back in prehistoric times, right? And so the backgrounds reflected. The backgrounds look like prehistoric world with, you know, weird trees and stuff like that. And so we got a note from this woman. She said, please remove the marijuana trees from the backgrounds. So so I called the guy up on his private line who ran the network, the boss. I called him on his. I said, hey, it's Bob Camp. He said, yeah, what do you want? I go, so the woman in charge of broadcast standards and practices, yeah. I said, is she retarded? And he hung up on me. And I feel bad about it to this day. I do. It was a bad thing to do, but you know, like I said, I didn't have many filters, but it was funny at the time. Got a good laugh from the guys, you know.
Right. Well, I mean, looking at it, you know, decades since, I mean, it was obvious. I mean, Ren and Stimpy had such long-lasting impact because it cut through all the other stuff that was out there, because you guys are making cartoons in a way that other people weren't making cartoons. And you can certainly see the SpongeBob wouldn't be SpongeBob without Ren and Stimpy.
Oh, and it's undeniable. You know, Steve Hillenburg, when he was interviewed by Esquire magazine, they did an issue on inspiration, and they showcased a lot of artists, and they talked about their inspirations, and then they would show the first drawing of that character. You know, so they interviewed Hillenburg, and they showed this drawing, the page with the very first drawings of SpongeBob on it. And he talked about all his inspirations, but he didn't mention Ren and Stimpy at all. But in the middle of this page of drawings was the best Stimpy I'd ever seen.
Mm.
Like, wow, that's a great Stimpy, but where is he in the article? Where's the hey, tip of the hat to the old Ren and Stimpy? But it's okay. Like, people thought we were geniuses, but we were copying, Mighty Mouse and Bob Clampett and, Hanna-Barbera. We weren't really inventing anything. We were just taking other people's, jokes and ideas and putting a new spin on them.
Yeah. Well, you're celebrating your heroes, the people that made you, like cartoons.
Yeah.
I think that was the thing that I noticed, is that these guys like really good cartoons, because a lot of cartoons you have like really talented people working on them, but it's just sort of like it's there. It's not, it's like you can like Inspector Gadget. Let's say it's not a horrible cartoon, but you're not going to get nothing that unique from something like that. Yeah,
and it's. God bless Inspector Gadget. It's still a pretty good show. I don't know if you could probably look it up on YouTube. If you look up the first film I ever made, I made with a guy named Brett McCormick in high school, and it's called Super Spy and Professor Mugwump. So if you just do a search on the internet for Bob Camp Super Spy, you'll find it and you can watch it and see how really terrible it is. But Super Spy is Inspector Gadget.
Wow.
But it's like 20 years before that, It's like when I was like, it's like 1975 when I made this. So you get to see like my pre-Inspector Gadget, Inspector Gadget.
Did you work on Inspector Gadget?
No, but it was right down the hall. I mean, I was in the same building. You know who was doing the music on that show? Chaim Saban.
Really?
Saban,
the richest man in animation. He was like, they had to bring his little Casio.
That's wild. And what's funny is, like, for a lot of people who are watching, and me included, I always try to stop myself from going, "Oh my God, that's my childhood." Because that's kind of like, I'm sure you get that at all the shows you go to.
Yeah, it makes me feel really friggin' old.
Well, that's one thing that I always like to talk about and ask, because there's such a corollary between fandom that doesn't really add up or connect with the creatives, right?
Sure.
So, and I know you do a lot of shows. I see you at a lot. Well, back when we did shows in the before time.
Yeah.
But just being surrounded by people who are there for the Ren and Stimpy love, and they can get that from you. Is there ever a point where you feel a little disconnected from it, where it's just like, "Oh, that's great. Yeah, I'll draw you a Stimpy," but you know what I mean?
No, in fact, Michelle Ford, my fiance, Missy, everybody calls her Missy. We were doing a lot of Comic-Cons. We were traveling around all over the world doing Comic-Cons. And what we call it is keeping the love alive. For the boys, because nobody else is doing it. I guess John's doing it, but I don't know. He's a pariah now. No one will even talk to him. I don't even know. I knew it. I knew it when we were doing Mississippi. I said, I'm going to be like Chuck Jones, sitting at a Comic-Con covered with mold and spores and stuff, with my nose falling in my fucking lap, drawing Ren Hoek leaning against a tree eating a carrot, saying, "What's up, Doc?" I knew it was going to happen.
Yeah.
And I knew there was nothing I could do about it. So, it's my lesson in life. But the thing about that is that it's a tough road, because I can't claim it's my show, because I'm a co-creator of the series, but I didn't create the characters, and the idea for the characters was John's. And you have to give a nod to Jim Gomez too. He had a lot to do with that. And another guy named Felix that they went to college with. I can't do much, like, in terms of like, hey Paramount, let's make a new Ren and Stimpy feature. I'll run it, I'll direct it and all that, because there's this other guy attached to it who has spent most of the time since the original series was done trying to kill the characters in the series forever. That's just my own opinion. You know, just understand that I have a lot of built-in resentment and stuff like that. So just understand that he's not my friend. I'm not his fan. I don't like him, you know, and I have some resentment for him because of what he's done, and the fact that I have to constantly defend the series and me and the other people who worked on the show. People start, you know, saying, "Oh, the guy who runs that's a pedophile," and stuff, and oh, you know, and I'm not going to watch the show. And then these people come out who were abused by him, and they speak out, and they make it their mission to make sure that there's no Ren and Stimpy ever made again. You know, and I understand that. I completely get that. You know, they've got these emotional scars and stuff. And so recently, I don't know if you guys know it, but they were actually seriously considering doing a reboot of Ren and Stimpy. They announced
I remember. Well, I followed. You know, I saw the whole thing blow up, and then people think, "Get Bob Camp to do it," and then
and then these women that suffered his abuse and all that said, like, no, don't do it, don't, because they saw it as a way to for him to get some good press, and they see him as a predator, and he uses his fame and his talent to lure young people in, and you know, and I'm not going to be judge and jury on that. I wasn't around when that happened. That happened after he was no longer on the original series. I had nothing to do with it. I didn't know anything about it. So, so it's a shame that the show has all of this luggage that goes along with it. You know, the bad blood. You know, and there was a lot of bad blood when the show broke up. You know, there was the us and them thing, and no one would continue the series. And they came to me and they said, "Okay, Bob, we just fired John, and unless you agree to take over the show, we're going to close your studio today, and there's not going to be any more Ren and Stimpy." And we were at the peak of the success of the show. We were one of the highest rated shows on cable TV. And I, like, for a while, I had to think it through and decide whether or not this was something I wanted to do. So I said I would do it, but I said I had to go talk to John. Yeah. So I went and talked to John. And he was hiding in his office, and I said, "Hey, they want me to finish the show, and they're talking about maybe doing a feature." And I told them I couldn't do it without your blessing. And he said, "You have my blessing. I'm you know, I can't handle this anymore. I'm actually relieved that it's over, and I don't have to do it anymore." And I said, "Okay, I want you to know that I promise you that I'm going to finish your cartoons," because he had like 4 or 5 cartoons in production, different places in production, and I knew that whoever else in the world they got to do it would fuck them up. I just knew it. They're not going to get it. They don't understand the humor. They don't understand John, and I did. And I could, you know, make a cartoon that passed pretty well for a John K. cartoon. So, and so that's what I did. And so I said, "Look, you know, I'm going to spare no money on your cartoons. I'm going to put the best guys on it. I'm going to give you a full layout crew, and I'm going to supervise layout on your cartoons." So that's what I did. So cartoons like Sven Hoek, I had a whole lot to do with. You know, cartoons that were, you know, in shambles, and I had to come in and jump in and do it. So what ended up happening is there was a split in the studio, and people that were my best friends in the whole world suddenly weren't my best friends in the whole world.
Wow.
And I got sort of got the moniker of kind of a Judas, you know. And then after Ren and Stimpy was over, I had trouble finding work. I would go into Cartoon Network, and you know, people would look at me like I was Lazarus risen from the grave, you know, and people just thought that I was a bad guy, you know,
because you stayed and finished the cartoons.
And I finished the series, and I delivered them on time and on budget.
Well, you know what also is really interesting about that, Bob, is that you saved a lot of people's jobs.
Yeah, I did.
Doing that. Like, and did you get any credit for that, at least for the studio? Like,
Well,
thanks for keeping the lights on, you know?
Oh, at first they were, you know, they were really happy, and they were really, but you know, a lot of the things that were wrong with the relationship between the studio and Nickelodeon were still kind of wrong, and had to do with what we wanted to do and what their expectations were. And then there was some infighting in the studio, a little bit. Different people who didn't really want me to be their boss and wanted to be their own boss. So a little bit of power play stuff going on.
Sure.
And you know, Brett, you and Mike know it. I tell people all the time, like I was talking about my students, I tell them, you know, unless this is something you really want to do, it's a terrible business, and it'll turn you into a drunk.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because I told the story before on the podcast, but I called Hanna-Barbera 1980. I saw an ad that had when they still had the trainee program.
Yeah.
And there was a phone number you could call. Great. Call the phone number and get some old Hanna-Barbera guy on it, and he basically goes, "You don't want to work in animation, kids. It's a shit business." So, you know, I mean, I eventually worked in animation, but yeah, the old timers were, some of them obviously were bitter.
Yeah, sure.
You know?
Sure they were. And, you know, like, I don't really know the exact story, but I heard that Tex Avery was doing timing sheets on something like Josie and the Pussycats or something like that, some embarrassing program, and he was like walking out to his car in the Hanna-Barbera parking lot and just dropped dead.
Jesus.
You know, and I thought, oh shit, I don't want to go like that. You know, I don't want to drop dead in the parking lot. You know,
the thing about animation is, I think coming into it from comics, people buy the comics, they see your name, you're there, they're buying your art, they know who you are.
Yeah.
It's fewer people. It's like maybe 10 people. In animation, there's hundreds of people. It's this collaboration. It's global. Yeah, it's global, even more so now. And, you know, you've got to work with a team, and, you know, you may not, I mean, the things you were describing are the downside of doing it, because you can have something that's really great, and what they say, like, success has 100 fathers and failure is an orphan. So if the show becomes a success, then all the executives and everybody else wants to glom on top, because they want to, they want to get all the success, you know.
Sure. And
you're dealing with that.
Yeah, and they want to have ownership of all the ideas and stuff. You know, they want to be creative. It's a hard business.
But also, I think
the sheer amount of work that you have to do is almost masochistic too. I mean,
sure it is.
You have to be really, you know, there's some drive to see those drawings come to life that keeps you sitting there for, you know, 22 hours, 36 hours straight sometimes.
Sure. You know what I used to do, Brett, when I was working for I was working on what was it? I was working on some show, and Cow and Chicken. I was working on Cow and Chicken, and the deadlines were so tight, and there was so much material in them that I started drawing on 8x10 pieces of paper, and my panels were like this big. They were like 2x1.
Yeah.
And I drew all my panels with a red ballpoint pen, a big red ballpoint pen, and like full panels. And I would do the whole storyboard on sheets with like 12 panels, you know. And then I spent a lot of time on a Xerox machine blowing them up so that I have a finished board. But I like shortcut stuff like that. And I see, my problem is I keep reinventing the process, thinking, there's got to be a better way. You know, and all I end up doing is just, you know, making myself miserable and pissing everybody off, because, like, why don't you just do it the regular way? You know. But what are you working on now?
Yeah.
Right now, I'm teaching.
Mhm.
Teaching's taking up most of my time at SVA. I'm teaching online, just like this.
Mhm.
My morning class has 20 students. Most of them are Chinese girls who live in China, and they're really smart and talented and hardworking. But my students are mostly international. I have 2 classes, one in the morning, one in the evening on Thursdays. And they're in groups right now, and they're working on their projects together.
And are you completely remote? Are you going in at all?
No, I can't.
Yeah.
I told them there's no way I'm going to go in.
Mhm.
And this is easier anyway because I don't have to commute 2 hours from the Jersey Shore into the city each way, and then hang out in the city for the whole middle of the day between noon and 3 o'clock, waiting for the next
Fanning
class.
away the COVID while you wait till your next
So-
class starts. Yeah.
Have they
Yeah.
talked about the spring term, or maybe rolling you guys back in slowly or anything like that?
No, they're being real careful, and I can't even go into one of the buildings because I didn't like sign off that I've been tested and all that stuff. So I'm not even allowed to go in the building. So I'm just online, and that's fine. I can do it at home.
I wanted to ask you a question about your international students, because I know that some schools like SVA have a lot of international students, and I think Art Center had a lot of international students. And so going back to the time when you started, and where we are now, animation and the kind of animation and everything has bled through the entire world now. Like, the world has almost the same culture when it comes to entertainment, which was not the case 20 or 30 years ago. We would see Star Blazers or something that they would bring over here, and they might see a couple things of ours that would go over there. But now you'll get students now that know everything that's on Nickelodeon, everything that's on Cartoon Network, everything that's on Netflix, everything that's on Crunchyroll.
Yeah.
So what would you say that the pluses that you see and the weaknesses that you see in the students in general now?
Well, most all of them draw in a kind of a manga style,
Like a
animation.
default, like Disney used to be like the default style for
For everybody.
Yeah.
But I'm seeing some new stuff. I don't really know. I'm kind of out of touch with what people are watching or what people are doing.
So you don't watch just to kind of go through and see what's floating around.
Nah, I don't. Isn't that weird? It's kind of strange. Like, there's stuff I like. Like, have you seen Fooly Cooly?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, love that. Yeah.
Have you seen that, Brett? Fooly
No,
Cooly.
I'm probably more out of touch than you are, Bob. So.
Oh, okay. Well,
I have the DVDs.
Yeah, but it's a cartoon series made in Japan, and it's mind-boggling. It keeps reinventing itself, and the animation's incredible, and it doesn't make any sense, but it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
It's just so much fun to watch. It's a great
Spell that.
FLCL.
FLCL. Yeah, but it's Fooly Cooly.
Mhm.
But sometimes it goes from being animation to being a comic book, and then suddenly you're reading a comic book that moves.
I've seen some of the artwork. I recognize that. I just haven't seen any of the films. So I've seen some of the artwork.
Yeah, it's.
I don't have it here, but somewhere around here. I actually have the art of book. My student, when I first started, because that Clearly is like 20 years old now.
That's like 20 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah.
When I first started teaching storyboarding, the kids in the class were into that. I'm like, oh, okay, and I watch it, and and it's like Apple Jacks. You don't know why you like it. It's cool. It's weird. It's got all this. It has poetry without the narrative of anime. I think, to me, when I think of it that way, it's there's a lot of mood, a lot of It's very Japanese in the way that it's
sure.
People standing there and the wind blowing in the cycle of their hair, that kind of stuff.
Have any of you guys discovered the work of Satoshi Kon? Satoshi Kon, a Japanese director. He's dead now. He died young, but in his 10-year career, he made some great films. His most famous one is called Paprika.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Paprika, and
that's amazing. Yeah.
the editing alone in that film is mind-boggling. And I look at Wes Anderson's films and I see the influence that Satoshi Kon had on him. Are you familiar with a guy named Tony Zhu? He made a video series called Every Frame a Painting.
No.
Oh, Jesus, you got to check that out. Just do a search, Every Frame a Painting.
Okay.
Tony Zhu is a film editor, and he's extremely knowledgeable about the work and techniques of different filmmakers and stuff. He has these videos, and they're like 10, 15 minutes long, some of them, but they're about like Hitchcock, they're about Chuck Jones, they're about Satoshi Kon, they're about all these great directors and their work and their editing and their filmmaking process and the way they use the camera and all that stuff. It's a really educational thing. It's kind of like a director's cut where the director's talking over the film, but it's this guy Tony Zhu. But he has a really nice video in his collection about the work of Satoshi Kon, and I try to turn as many people as I can onto his work because it's really terrific.
Hey, Bob, I have a little bit of show and tell.
Sure.
For you.
Yeah.
In doing my research for the show, I found some stuff that I had no idea that you were behind. And I'm a hip hop rap kid. I'm definitely a 70s, 80s baby in the early waves of hip hop albums and rap albums. There's so many things that are iconic. Yeah,
like this?
Like that. Hold on, let me give you the whole screen so you can see it.
Nucleus. Wiki.
Yeah, that's blowing
One of my album
mind.
covers I did.
Oh my god!
Yeah.
And what year was that? Do you remember?
85.
Wow. And I found a couple other ones too. Hold on, let me share the screen. Do you want to maybe touch on that real quick? Like, how did you get into doing album covers?
It was a friend who worked at Marvel named Nil Yomtov.
I remember. Yeah, he was my editor for a while.
Yeah. Somebody called Marvel and said, "Hey, we want a Marvel artist to do an album cover for these rap guys," and and Nell turned me on to the gig, and I did this. Lettering up here by Pete Friedrich,
wow.
One of my roommates. But I did this.
And there's that other Nucleus cover.
Yeah, Nucleus. Yeah, I like this one a lot. You could and there's absolutely no influence by Mobius in this drawing.
Nah.
None whatsoever.
And does this kind of harken back to your caricature work back when you were doing stuff on the streets, like just kind of doing likenesses and things like that?
Yeah, these actually look like them.
Yeah. That's wild. This is like hip hop history stuff. And I'm sure you hear things like that all the time with your work.
Mm-hmm.
But I had one other question I was going to ask you about all of this. So I know we all get into the business for whatever reason. A lot of it is you want to make money doing art. Especially when you're dealing with animation and comics, things catch fire once in a while. And I wonder, again, I always go back to this fan pro thing of catching fire on something. Where you're not really looking for that out of a project, right?
No.
Because talking to a lot of animators that I know, the energy is always, well, I just want to be working. I just want to make sure I'm working. And when that gig is starting to dry up, you're looking for the next thing.
Sure.
So kind of looking back on your career of all of these, especially in animation that you've touched on, and these things are now kind of like cornerstones of the 80s. Were you like looking at old things and going, oh, wow, well, that was really cool. It would have been great if that stayed around that extra 5 years, or did you enjoy the jumping through things?
I kind of did. And, usually things just sort of ended, like when when I was working at Rankin Bass, they got absorbed by some big media conglomerate, and it just got absorbed. And they said, okay, bye, we're done. Same with Crazy Magazine. That I could have worked on that forever, but they just quit making them. There was a decision to stop making them. Ren and Stimpy, they decided, okay, we've had enough BS from these crazy people. Let's just stop while we're ahead, and we can show them in reruns. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. I think I would have liked it if Ren and Stimpy could have had a better run, a longer run. And it just kind of came and went. It's sort of short. It's like Ren and Stimpy represents 4 years out of my 40+ year career.
Right. Right. And again, it's like, seems like that's something that a lot of people acknowledge you for without the rest of the iceberg.
Sure.
Underneath.
Yeah. I don't know. I really, to me, it's a lot about the process. Like, I've really enjoyed my time working in big studios because I got to work with really talented people. I worked in the Warner Brothers art department, on the lot, working with Ron Cobb on Cats and Dogs. I worked with Joe Dante on Looney Tunes Back in Action. I worked on the Grinch movie for Ron Howard. I got a great Jim Carrey story. You want to hear it?
Oh, please do. Yeah.
So I had to pitch my sequence, and so I'm pitching it, and it's a big meeting, and in the meeting are Brian Grazer and Ron Howard and the head of the costume department, the special effects guy, everybody was there, and the story team was there, and Jim Carrey was there. He was sitting there. So I'm pitching my board, and I'm going, and then he does this, and I've got my stick, like I've got my stick, and I'm pointing and talking, and suddenly I get this really weird feeling on my neck, like warmth on my neck, and I look around, and there's Jim Carrey's face, and he's right in my face, and he's a big guy. He's like 2 inches taller than me, and he's leering down at me, and he's making one of those crazy rubber faces he makes, and I can smell his breath, and I get suddenly really afraid. So I hold up my stick in front of him, and I go like this, like it's a cross, like he's a vampire or something. And I said, "What's he doing? Make him stop!" And Peter Ramsey, who directed the Spider-Verse movie, great director, and really good guy, but he was one of the story guys on that, and he said, "I think the big fella likes you, Bob." And so, he sort of passed me on the back and goes over and sits down. So that was cool. So when I'm taking all my panels down, he walks over and says, "Hey, man, I digs me some Ren and Stimpy." So that's my Jim Carrey story. And I stole his wallet.
Oh, nice.
No, I thought about it, but I didn't do that. Yeah.
Well, we're going to start wrapping up, Bob.
Okay.
We've had a great time. I have a couple other things, and I threw it out to the chat room if anybody has any lightning round questions for you.
Sure,
if you
sure.
feel like hanging around. But I wanted to get back to our buddy Bill O'Donnell asked a question that I had to table. I'm trying to find it. But he basically asked, do you have any... Oh, here you go. Bill O'Donnell's a fantastic cartoonist. Question for Bob. Being a part of the Marvel bullpen, what were some of the usual day-to-day stuff that happened? Any anecdotes from the bullpen?
You know what? It was like crazy stuff happened all the time. It was a really fun place to work. I call it the Mark Grunwald years. And right, Brett? It was the Mark Grunwald and Mike Carlin had an office, and it was, wackiness ensued. And you never knew what they were going to do or what was going to happen. And they were there day and night. It's like they lived there. And Elliot Brown was taking pictures of everything. And it was just a crazy time to be there. And I hung out in Larry Hama's office. And, Larry sit in his bunker. He called it his bunker, like with it's sandbags and shit. It's like really was a bunker. And he'd sit at his desk, like talking on the phone and cleaning his gun. It was just crazy times. And I remember meeting people like I'm sitting in Larry's office and in walks Barry Windsor Smith. I expect to hear the band playing in the background or something, playing some royal kind of English sounding music. So Larry said, "Oh, this is Bob Camp. Bob, this is Barry Windsor Smith." And I'm such an asshole, I couldn't resist it. And I jumped up and shook his hand. And I go, "Hi, what do you do?" And the look on his face was great. It just really sour, I love that shit.
Did you?
Archie was there, and I mean that whole for maybe 8 or 9, 10 years was like a party when you went in there. It was just fun, and I think it's either in a
No security. No. Yeah, it was real laid back.
It was pretty laid back and fun. I was just really lucky to be there, and it was like going to school but getting paid for it, And like I said, I had to be a sponge, so I just watched what everyone did, and I figured out how they did the color separations and how they fixed the art on the pages and all that stuff. And Larry kept throwing good work toward me.
What was the coolest art that you saw when you were there? Like, do you remember any?
God, I remember working on Kaluda's Shadow book. You remember that book? Remember that? It was one thing that happened a lot back in those days is I get a call from Larry. He says, "All right, come on down to Marvel. We need you." So we do what he would call a mini hands job, and it was me and Joe Barney and God knows who else there, Joe Jusko, John Wellington, a whole lot of people there. And we would have to color a book overnight or something like that. And that's how we did that job. But I just remember looking at Kaluda's work and just thinking, "Oh my God, how can somebody draw like this?" Like it's so fantastic and beautiful and just beautiful. His work, like all the guys in the studio, all that stuff. And just being around a lot of great talent, like Nestor Redondo would walk in with pages like, "Oh, Nestor Redondo pages," you get to look at that. And it was just a terrific time. I was really lucky.
He's another guy who didn't clean his brush.
Yeah. I believe that. Probably kept the brush for years and years.
He had a big bamboo brush with this big lump on it. It looked like a miniature hornet's nest, and then the tip coming out of the end.
Wow.
He can do all this amazing stuff with it.
Yeah. Better than anybody. Yeah, it was just a great time to be there. Was a lot of talent coming in and out of the place, and there were a lot of the old people from the show. From the comics were still there, still working. It was a great time, and everybody was like real happy to tell a weird kid like me, like how to do the job.
Bob, when did you start folding into the comic book convention circuit? Because I think that's where I met you first, just being at the show.
I really didn't do many conventions. I went to a few, like during Marvel days. Like I'd go to San Diego because it wasn't a far drive when I lived out in LA. But I didn't really start doing it till 2010. I was sitting at home being broke, and I didn't have any work. It was like remember 2008, there was just no work. Yeah, well, that went on for me for a couple of years. And Larry Hama called me. He said, "Hey, I'm at New York Comic Con. I got a 6-foot table, and I got 3 foot of shit on the table and an empty chair. You wanna come down and do some sketches?" So I said, "Sure." So he draws, and I do too. He draws on 8.5 by 11 sheets of 110-pound cardstock, which is not actually a very bad paper to draw on. It's pretty nice paper, and it's really cheap. So he had a stack of that. So I took a sheet of that and I folded it in half and I wrote my name on it, and I just set it in front of me and I drew all weekend. And I walked out with a pocket full of money, and I said, "Wow, why didn't I know about this before?" I mean, I knew about it, but I didn't. Yeah. So this year's the first New York Comic Con I've missed since then. And I've been doing Comic Cons pretty regularly since then.
Yeah. I know that you're famous for tagging up your table before you head out on Sunday.
Oh, yeah. Well, they always have those cheap plastic tablecloths
Yeah.
Yeah, so I draw on it and give
Oh,
it away.
I bet there's like people who are collecting those somewhere. There's
Oh,
gotta be
sure.
somebody.
People can have them up on their walls. Yeah.
There's a question from the room.
Okay.
Our buddy Giovanni asks, this is a general question for everybody. Where do you all see the animation industry going in the next 10 to 15 years? If anybody want to weigh in on that?
I don't know. I can't tell you. I can't see how the world's going to go in 1 year. I think that everybody is scared and confused and worried and sick, and we have to get over this Trump stuff and get back to having some sanity in our lives and some people in Washington that actually know what they're doing and aren't just trying to make a buck. So I don't really know, but I think that. And you mentioned Crunchyroll, Mike. I think that, that's an example of the distribution model changing. And it's not just, watching cartoons on Saturday morning on ABC, CBS, or NBC. It's like, you buy into an app and you can watch all these cartoons and stuff from around the world. And it's a completely different thing. And I think it's more custom designed to a younger audience. Because it's the kind of shows they like. I don't really know from a financial angle how that's going to work or how that's going to play out, because I don't think that way. I'm not like somebody who sits around. I probably should be somebody worrying about money, but to me, it's more about the art. But I think it's going to be okay. I think the animation industry is doing well because the four of us could sit at home and make an animated cartoon and never be in the same room. Yeah. So it's very COVID friendly. You don't have to have actors in the same room in the same camera view, standing close together. You don't have to do that. People love animation. Everybody loves animation. So you can create shows where you're only limited by your imagination and your talent and stuff like that. So there's a lot of great stuff coming out that changes what people are doing and watching and all that. So I'm just happy that it's popular and a lot of animators are getting work these days.
I think we've talked a little bit about this on the podcast before. I think what's happening is technology, like what we're using now, and zooming. The technology is going to open the world up. We're talking to Phil and Laura, and they're hiring storyboard guys from Africa.
Where's this? Where?
We're hiring storyboard guys to work in animation on shows that are like on Netflix and stuff from Africa. It's like now you can get people from anywhere in the world if you don't have to be in the studio, like you said.
Yeah.
Right.
Now you open up the globe to get the best people from anywhere in the world that can work virtually. I think that's going to really change things, because you also have all these big corporations who go, at some point, why do I need a $50 million building in the middle of Los Angeles?
Right?
Like super expensive, when I can make people pay for their own light. I don't have to pay for the light. They have to buy the tech. I'm not buying the tech. They have to buy the tech. Just like you were talking about the when you started in comics, you had a piece of paper and a pencil, a brush, ink. That was it. Now to do this job, just to do storyboarding, right? You got to have a Cintiq. You got to have the programs. You got to have thousands of dollars to do the same job in 2021 that you didn't have to in 2010.
Right. Right.
And so I think all that's going to change things also in ways that we can't really predict, because one of the things about working in animation is we may drive content in the far as our talent, but we don't drive content as far as dollars.
Yeah.
So I think that the student coming in today is going to have to learn a lot more technology and that technology is going to keep changing because they're doing
Sure.
Zoom now. In 5 years, people won't use Zoom; they'll use some other.
In one year,
Mhm.
things are changing that quickly. You know, when we started doing Ren and Stimpy, the pilot, we did it on film, you know,
Right.
and we cut the soundtrack on tape. We used moviolas, you know. We had to cut negative and then make a work print. You know, all that actual physical editing and cutting of film.
Yeah.
You know, we did that. By the middle of season 1, we were doing digital cartoons. I did the first one. It was called Out West, and we had these people doing digital ink and paint, and they really were inventing it as they went along, and we were sort of making it up as we went along. So you know, we were right there at the beginning of that, and also the beginning of the use of digital music. You know, we bought into a big digital music library, had thousands of CDs of all kinds of music and stuff. So we just had, you know, to pick and choose what we liked and cut it to fit. And we realized right away that there was a lot of stuff that the technology enabled us to do that we couldn't have done before, like having self-color trace lines. Like if a character is, you know, it sticks his tongue out, it can have a red line around it instead of a black line. You know, just a matter of choice, and it's simple to do. It's easy to go in and change your color script and, you know, the mood of your scene by just, you know, playing with a few knobs and changing the color, and it's pretty terrific, you know. So there was a cartoon made in the late '90s called Foolie. No, it was called Mucha Lucha.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
It was a cartoon about Mexican wrestlers,
Mhm.
and it was created by a young couple in Australia, from Sydney, who actually worked on Ren and Stimpy. They were a couple of animators on some shows that were made over there, and so I was up for the job of being the producer of this series. So Flash, and it was going to be the first cartoon on TV made in Flash. So I did my homework, and I figured out how Flash worked, and I looked into the production, and I figured out right away that the difference between Flash animation and traditional animation is Flash is pre-production heavy and traditional animation is production heavy. So you do most of your work, you're building your assets and your designs and your backgrounds and all that up front, and then you can reuse them and reuse them and reuse them. And then as you create new walk cycles, new expressions and stuff, they go into the library. So your resources grow and the shows get easier and cheaper to make. So I figured out a way to use a small group of people, shifting jobs within the schedule to make a schedule that was workable and to do it on half the budget. You know, and I said, look, you know, if you pay these guys more than they're used to getting, they can afford their own equipment, afford their own software, afford their own insurance, and they don't have to commute to work, and you don't have to pay for this big building. All you need is a person somewhere operating a server to manage the footage, manage the work. And they looked at me like I was out of my mind, you know?
Yeah.
And there was a guy who was the controller who was in the meeting, and he was the guy who dealt with the studios in Korea, who would go over and talk to the studios and get them to bid on the jobs. But I also knew that these guys were on the take. That they go over there and they, you know, somebody in a Korean studio gives them a few $1,000s. Sure, you'll get the job because they all use the same artists. You know, there's a talent pool that all the studios in Korea use. You know, and so I realized right then that they had a way they wanted to do it, which wasn't about process as much as it was about keeping a system going. And they think, oh, we'll just use Flash, and they didn't know what it meant, or they didn't understand how the production would go. And I'd say, look, you're gonna send this over there, and they're gonna use Flash. You can use Flash 100 different ways. You're gonna get back incomprehensible shit, and you're gonna have to call lots and lots of retakes because they're you know, you can use Flash as a paint and ink program, or you can fully animate in it, but you don't know what you're gonna get. You know, because it's not like hand drawn; it's different. And now that's how things are being done, 20 years later, 21, 2 years later. But I don't know. What do I know? I'm just a cartoonist.
Yeah, and even the onset of depends on how long we're going to be stuck at home like this, and seeing that there's some industries that don't seem to be getting hit in the same way that other ones are. Like, I'm real bummed that the taco spot is closing down the street for me.
Oh,
but
no.
But Netflix is still making cartoons. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah.
So like I feel like there's a fire that has to be fueled as far as content, because everything's content now.
Sure. Well, I think that the stuff that is great will find its place, and the stuff that isn't will just vanish, because people won't watch it, and taste changes quickly, and people's attention spans are getting shorter.
So short, yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, hell, I'm 64. I could just retire and say, fuck this. I don't want,
well, and then do what? Just sit around all day and draw?
I hate drawing.
Like Wilbur Cobb?
Like Wilbur Cobb. So, you want to know about Wilbur Cobb?
Yeah,
real quick. So Wilbur Cobb, okay, the guy who was the story editor for Nickelodeon, his name was Will McRobb. So Wilbur Cobb is making fun of Will McRobb's name. But we had this story at the beginning of Spumco that people would ask us about the studio and where it came from. And we had this guy, his name wasn't Wilbur Cobb, it was Raymond Spum. And Raymond Spum was this guy who was like a protege of Disney or something. And we made up this whole long story about him and the actual father of animation, and Disney ripped him off, and he created Spumco and all that kind of stuff. We created this whole history. And then when Spumco got shut down, so suddenly Spumco wasn't a word we were throwing around much. So we changed his name to Wilbur Cobb. And there was this cassette tape that was floating around. People were making copies of it. And it was of some Hollywood film mogul who was really, really old and had completely lost his mind. He was like, you want to be a genius? Rah, 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 rah. Talking like that. And so I hired Jack Carter, the comedian, the great Jack Carter, who talks like that anyway. And we just printed out the rambling of this crazy person. And that was his script. And he just read the stuff. And then Wilbur Cobb is just like, amazing character, and all the scenes of Wilbur Cobb in the Sippy's cartoon show, the first cartoon he appeared in, were laid out by Chris Riccardi, who passed away recently. And you knew Chris, nobody better, an amazing character and a bon vivant guy who didn't take shit from anybody and drew better than anybody. And yeah, great guy. So, and one of the real talents on the show that, people need to sort of tip a hat at once in a while.
Well, I think that Ren and Snippy is going to be one of those cartoons that just keeps going on. Every 10, 15 years, another round of kids are going to discover it,
Sure.
Get inspired by it. And so I think that it must feel good to, despite all the pimples and the wrinkles and the raging and the anger and the bitterness and the bile, to have worked on something that still brings a lot of joy to people.
Oh, sure. I made up the words happy, happy, joy, joy, and I think that's really central to the whole thing, is that, to have fun and have a good laugh and make funny cartoons. And I'm still surprised that all the people that love Log, which was filler. When we delivered the first episodes of Ren and Stimpy the first week, we were a minute short of footage. So we knew we wanted to do fake commercials. So we did a Log. And I talked to John. I said, well, what are we going to do? He said, just do Log. That's all he said. So I had tapes of lots and lots of TV commercials, animated TV commercials from the 50s and 60s, and I studied them, and I stole shit from all of them. The kid in Log is Marky Mapo from Mapo Cereal.
Yeah, right.
And I stole the song from Slinky, which is obvious. But I'm still surprised at how incredibly people love that, and it means so much to them. And it was just a dumb joke. Yeah. It was just some silly crap we did. So
that's the one thing that I think that must be hard sometimes. I think about humor, because humor is the hardest thing to do, because humor is also subjective. But when you're making something that's going to be funny, if you're writing a bit and you go out on stage and you deliver it, you go out, you get the immediate reaction from the audience, go back and tweak it, go back. But when you're making a cartoon and you watch the thing freaking 50,000 times, and then you send it overseas, and then you get it back, and then you look at it, is it still funny, or do you get burnt out on like, oh, I don't want to?
Yeah, you do. You see the mistakes. That's the thing. But I'll tell you a story, and this is a good one to end on. On February 7th, 1991, 92. February 7th, 1992, we premiered in a party the cartoon Stimpy's Invention, which I wrote and boarded. It was my idea. And so we had a party, and there were like famous people there. There were comedians there. There was like Hollywood types, and we were showing it on film. We're projecting it on a screen. And I'm sitting on the floor in front of the screen watching this cartoon, and a cartoon that I was deeply involved with making. And I'm looking at these people, and they're laughing so hard that snot and tears are running down their faces, and they're convulsing. And I thought, oh, fuck. Like, this is something I got to remember for the rest of my life, because my work had something, an effect on people this profound. I've never seen anyone laugh at a Tex Avery cartoon this hard. It's like, this cartoon is really that great and really that funny. So, that's a high point in my life, something I'll never forget. And I'm really grateful to have been a part of. And I tell people that a lot. They say, what was it like working at Spumco, working on Mississippi? And I say, did you ever read A Tale of Two Cities? Do you remember the first page of A Tale of Two Cities? Read it sometime. It explains exactly what it was like working in Mississippi. And the first line in the book is, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. And that's it. It was great, and boy, did it suck. And when it sucked bad. But, we made some great cartoons.
Wow. Bob, let me ask you one last question on your way out the door. Maybe not so much influences, but how did you kind of create your comedic timing? Because just even being around you at a comic book convention and you're doing Ren and Stimpy sketches and you're just banging out this hilarious shit on paper and just handing them off, where did you develop that at? Or just being sharp?
My mom was hilarious. She was the funniest woman you ever met. Really, really, really funny sense of humor, and she didn't take shit from anybody. And she was great. I learned a lot. And like I said, traveling the world doing caricatures, I learned a lot doing that. Plus, I hung around with really funny people who inspired me a lot. And I got to do movie parodies for Mad Magazine. For Crazy Magazines. And, I've been a lucky guy. I've been around a lot of funny people doing funny stuff.
Yeah.
Do you think funny can be learned?
I think so. But I also think that you kind of got to be funny to begin with. Like I know people who just draw well enough to make you cry, but they're not funny.
Yeah.
They're not, it's not their thing. It's just drawing beautifully and drawing well and making stuff that is terrific. But, the really good guys like Frank Frazetta, he could be really funny. He could do funny shit. He was, ghosting Al Cap, so there's just guys out there who can do it all. And that's kind of always what I wanted to be, is somebody who was comfortable doing different stuff. I kind of relate to session musicians. You know, they can just step in a room and change styles on cue. You know, that's kind of what I like. That's fun to me.
Wow.
Yeah. And then there's that weird thing with funny, because you could be like, you could say Frazetta was funny, but then you could look at somebody like Gahan Wilson, who had this weird style, but it was funny. And sometimes you see a weird drawing and it's funny, but you can't really explain it in like a technical way.
Yeah. I have a funny theory about the power of art. Is that the emotional effect of art on a person is due largely to abstraction, the abstract aspects of the art. Like, I really like film noir. I always like film noir, you know, because it's all about shadow play and dark against light, and it's, you know, it has a powerful effect on people, you know, and I think that style does that. Good style, you know, it carries it a step further, you know, and has a real strong communication to it that kind of transcends words, and it has to do with feelings and things like that. It's like music, you know, and it's hard to kind of put your finger on or quantify, but I think it's through the artist's expression, you know. I think that's the power of Picasso and people like that had great talent as artists, but they chose to do something else that said more and meant more to them, which, you know, most people couldn't even begin to understand, but nevertheless are affected by that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So
wow, that's great.
yeah, isn't that funny? I
Yeah.
talk about that with my students all the time, and I try to get their theories on that, you know, because they get hung up on style, and I'm like, nah, screw style. Learn how to draw, then we'll talk about style. You know, work on your construction, work on your line of action, work on your balance. You know, think about light, dark, things like that, and then you can start to play with style.
Yeah, I think when you're young, you're really, we were the same way. There was people you wanted to wear the suit like that. You want to have that style because it's so pleasing, and it gives you all the answers, you know. And some people never go beyond that. You know what I mean? They get to be a good mimic of in a certain way, and they find that satisfying enough that they don't ever have to go beyond that.
Sure. It's what they want to say. But I really don't. I don't think I ever knew what I wanted to do. I still don't. You know, I'm still trying to figure it out. It's kind of funny.
Yeah. Well, I think that your career is a reflection of your interest also in multiple things.
Yeah.
That you probably didn't even realize were related in some of the stuff relates, you know?
Sure. And I do realize that now. I constantly come up against things that I'm grateful for my experience, like working in an art studio or being someone's assistant. You know, I've done it all. The only kind of art I've never really made a living with is like sculpture or blowing glass or something like that. But any kind of drawing, painting, comics, anything like that, I've tried my hand at, and I've always learned something in the process that is applicable to stuff I do later, which is completely different. You know.
Bob, where can people follow you or see some of your stuff or buy things on the internet?
You can go to Bob Lab Studios on Facebook, and we have Bob Lab Shop, which is where we have stuff you can buy. You can order commissions. I'm doing commissions, and whatever you want. There's stuff there. We have toys, we have prints, we have all kinds of original art, different stuff like that. So it's on Facebook, Bob Lab Shop, Bob Lab Studios. You can check it out.
Awesome. Bob, you know what? Tomorrow's Thanksgiving. I am so thankful that we got to speak with you today.
Thanks. Well, I'm glad I got to see you guys, and I'm glad to see Brett.
Yeah.
Been a while, man.
I think it was actually here in Prescott was the last time I saw you.
I remember that. I remember coming to your house, And it was, I remember thinking, wow, it's like one big open space. And I remember that well. That was fun times. I liked that whole area.
Yeah, it's grown, but it's still nice. So,
Are you still there?
still in the same house, yeah.
Still in the same house? Wow, that's great. It's a terrific town.
Yeah.
I love it. I love the way it just sort of goes off a cliff. I love that.
Oh, Bob, I just got a question in the room about buying stuff from you. Do you ship internationally?
I don't know. You have to ask Michelle.
Okay.
She does that, but I don't know. I mean, if they're willing to pay for it, sure.
Yeah, anything's possible if you pay for it.
Yeah, right.
All right, well, we're going to put this to bed. Thank you so much, Bob, for being on the show. Much love to Missy. I hope she's well.
All right. Missy, Jamar says hi. Much love.
So wave it.
Yeah.
And I hope we can have you back again. It's always great to catch up and talk shop.
Yeah.
I hope you enjoyed your time on the show tonight.
Oh, that's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Cool, thanks. All right, cool. All right. Well, if you don't mind, if you want to hang out, we're gonna close the show out.
No, I'm gonna go. All right. And you guys take care. Nice talking to you all.
All right.
Cheerio.
Yeah. Okay. Bye now.
Happy, joy.
happy, joy. Thanks so much, Bob. And I'm gonna flush him. Bam! I feel so good. Thanks everybody for
gobble
for hanging out with us tonight. This was kind of an impromptu episode. We were planning on just kind of going dark tonight, but Bob made himself available. So how do you say no to Bob Camp?
You don't.
You don't. You just don't. So again, we're gonna wrap this up. Thanks so much to my co-hosts Brett and Mike. I hope everybody has a wonderful time. Please stay safe and make sure
social distance. Wash your hands.
Yeah, I just
save your grandma.
I just read this thing about a couple of days ago was the biggest travel date since the pandemic started.
I got a message. I got you get those Amber Alert things.
Yeah,
I got an Amber Alert tonight on my phone about the COVID.
Yeah, it said please stay home.
Yeah. I saw you going outside. The satellite was tracking me.
So, but yeah, everybody stay safe, and we will be back next Wednesday. with Katie Cook. I'm really looking forward to that, and we hope to see you then. So you guys have a great weekend, and all right, we're going to get ready. You know what to do.
Yep.
Have a good night. Be safe, and remember to wash those curvy hands. Oh, that's a good one.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Oh, Brett has a great technique. I love it. Thanks, guys. Have a good one.